He called Jiang a liar and ordered his men to catch the girl. Jiang stared at him silently, looking serious. When the girl saw the man with blue hair, her expression changed. She looked at him, panicking and terrified. She told Jiang that he had already taken everything from the Luo family. Then she asked the man why he wanted to kill her so badly. The man looked at her and calmly asked if he really needed a reason. When Jiang heard she was from the Luo family, he turned to her, staring intently and seriously. Jiang and the girl were on the second floor of the abandoned warehouse, while the man with blue hair and his subordinates were on the first floor. She clenched one fist, extended her other hand to the side, and stared at the man, warning him that if he killed her, the Luo family would never forgive him. She added that the Luo family would never let him live in peace. Jiang, standing behind her with his arms dropped to his sides, kept watching the man. Hearing this, the man with blue hair burst into laughter and asked if she truly believed that a family like the Luo family could do such a thing. At that moment, his subordinates began to smile at the girl. With one hand on his waist and the other covering his face, the man couldn't help but laugh. He found it amusing that a second-rate family with a bit of money took themselves so seriously. He revealed to the girl that without the protection of the Xiao family ancestors 100 years ago, the Luo family would have been annihilated long ago. Upon hearing this, one of his subordinates unsheathed his sword while the others started laughing. Zheng Tai crossed his arms, stared intently at Jiang, and couldn't help but smile. With a serious look, he lifted his head, removed his hand from his face, and told her that in the eyes of the Xiao family, they were no different from humble peasants. He added that to them, they were merely cattle for the Xiao family to slaughter. Hearing this, Jiang turned his head toward him, his eyes filled with hatred as he stared intently. He couldn't believe such arrogance. The man extended his hand forward, and his palm started emitting a powerful red energy that began to rise towards the sky. He then looked at the girl with a smile and asked what the Xiao family could investigate if there was nothing left to find. Moments later, the energy he had released formed a powerful barrier around the abandoned warehouse. This ability was known as the Dragon Prison Formation of the Xiao family. The girl looked up at the sky, placed a hand on her chest, and clenched her fist, feeling both astonished and panicked, unsure of how she would escape. Jiang also lifted his head, and upon seeing the barrier, couldn't help but be amazed. To him, the man with blue hair was indeed very interesting. Jiang and the girl were on the second floor of the old warehouse. Zheng Tai took out his sword, looked at the girl, and got ready to attack. He told everyone to obey the young master's orders and not spare anyone. They all agreed. The man with blue hair next to Zheng Tai stayed quiet. A few seconds passed, and Zheng Tai was about to attack. Suddenly, the man with blue hair stepped forward and signaled him to halt by raising his hand. Then, he looked at Jiang and said with a smile that the girl from the Luo family had to die that day. He seemed intrigued by Jiang because he knew Jiang had powerful abilities. After speaking, he continued to gaze at Jiang and told Zheng Tai that being a spiritual master, a type of creation class, was incredibly rare. Unlike others who were unaware, he understood its significance. With a smile, he extended his hand and offered Jiang the chance to seize everything today. He stretched out his hand to Jiang and instructed him to seize the girl, offering to spare his life in return for serving the Xiao family. Then, he turned to Jiang and inquired about his opinion. The girl, with her hands on her waist, couldn't help but be shocked upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Jiang lowered his arms and stayed silent for a few moments. Jiang looked down at the ground and couldn't resist smiling and complimenting him, acknowledging the Xiao family's knack for persuasive talk. The girl glanced at him, feeling a surge of panic, unsure if Jiang would indeed accept the offer. Jiang glared at the man with blue hair with a fierce expression, refusing his offer and mocking him by saying the Xiao family could go to hell. He clenched his fists tightly, his body emitting the poisonous mist of Little Nine. With a serious tone, he firmly stated his refusal. He challenged the man to come for him if he wanted a fight. The girl turned toward Jiang, clasping her hands to her chest. Seeing him enveloped in poisonous mist, she took a few steps back, feeling terrified and confused about what was happening. Upon learning of Jiang's rejection, The man with blue hair became enraged, feeling dishonored. He commanded his subordinates to attack and finish Jang. Upon receiving the order, they drew their swords, built up momentum, leaped forward, and swiftly advanced towards Jang. As they leaped through the air, Zheng Tai glanced at Jiang and cautioned the others to be wary, acknowledging that Jiang was formidable. Drawing nearer, Jiang remained still, silently watching them without any action. Moments later, as they neared the second floor, Zheng Tai noticed the poisonous mist surrounding Jiang's body. He warned the others that Jiang could wield poison and advised against a direct attack. Seeing the imminent attack, the girl sought shelter behind Jiang. Suddenly, Jiang deactivated the poisonous mist, reaching out his hand towards them. Surrounded by a green energy, he fixed a serious gaze on Jiang Tai and disclosed that he not only wielded poison, but also possessed a talent ability. Witnessing this, the girl stepped back, her hand instinctively reaching for her chest. She turned to Jiang, feeling a mix of confusion and curiosity about his newfound power. Suddenly, green spiritual roots sprouted from the ground. Zheng Tai moved closer to Jiang, gripping his sword tightly with both hands, readying himself to attack. In that instant, he glanced downward and was astonished by the sight of the spiritual roots. He couldn't help but ponder what this newfound ability was. The roots swiftly expanded, wrapping around Zheng Tai and the others, immobilizing them completely. Panic set in as they grappled with the unfamiliar situation. Jiang, with his hand outstretched, explained that his ability was the evolution of all things. Gradually, the spiritual roots tightened around Zheng Tai's body. He instinctively grasped at the roots, his gaze fixed on Jiang, bewildered by the unfolding events. Observing the immense strength of the roots, he realized that Jiang's class was of divine rank. Confusion clouded his mind as he recalled Jiang's ability to wield poison. Refusing to remain passive, he drew his sword, gripping it tightly with both hands, and exerted all his strength to slice through the roots ensnaring him. Witnessing his actions, the others followed suit, joining in the effort to free themselves. He urged them to attack the roots, noting their fragility. As the spiritual roots fell around the man with blue hair, he swiftly pushed them away with his hands, quickly grasping the situation. With a startled expression, he shouted, berating Zheng Tai for falling for the distraction. He emphasized that Jiang was now prepared to launch an attack. With Zheng Tai and the others distracted, Jiang seized the opportunity to release the insects, their gaze piercing. Enveloped in poisonous mist, he extended his hand to the side, locking eyes with them, and declared that it was already too late. Meanwhile, the girl sat on the floor, her hand resting upon it. Raising her head, she was taken aback by the sight of the insects. While Zheng Tai's subordinates were preoccupied with cutting the roots, the insects advanced toward them. Turning his head, he caught sight of the insects, his expression shifting dramatically. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he was overcome with shock, pondering the identity of these creatures. The insects swiftly moved and launched their attack. Zheng Tai tried to defend himself with his sword, but to his dismay, the insects overwhelmed him with their strength, shattering his weapon within seconds. Shocked and disbelieving, he stared in horror as Jiang had effectively destroyed his only means of defense. Upon closer examination, he discerned that the mist wasn't poison, but rather summoned monsters. Suddenly, an insect lurched towards him from behind, poised to strike. Startled, he lifted his head, shocked by the revelation. With growing alarm, he shouted to the others, disclosing that the apparent poisonous mist emanated from these creatures. Realizing he couldn't evade the attack, Zheng Tai faced his fate. Jiang, controlling the insect with an outstretched hand, fixed him with a murderous gaze and smiled, satisfied he had finally trapped him. Just as the insect was about to strike Zheng Tai, someone intervened, placing a foot on his shoulder, calling him trash and ordering him to get lost. Turning his head to the side, he felt a wave of confusion. Jiang, too, was both puzzled and amazed by the sight. The person intervening was none other than the man with blue hair. Drawing his sword and gripping it with one hand, he gathered momentum, leaped forward, and slowly advanced towards Jiang, executing the first form of Kongning's 9 forms. As he did this, an orange aura emanated from his body. Jiang, still enveloped by Little Nine's poisonous mist, remained silent. The girl sitting next to him covered her mouth in terror. Jiang looked up at the advancing figure and, realizing he was faster than the mist, clenched his teeth and began to sweat. He employed the Xiao family's secret technique, known as chasing dragons. Instantly, a dragon made of spiritual energy appeared, fixating on Jiang. With a fierce expression, it lunged at him. The dragon's attack was so powerful that it shattered the area around Jang into pieces, creating a thick smoke screen in the process. Holding his sword with one hand and extending it toward Jiang, he stared intently and smiled, calling him a bastard. He knew Jiang would be a challenge, but he took comfort in knowing Jiang's level wasn't very high and his speed wasn't impressive. He believed that with this blade alone, he could defeat him. To his astonishment, once the smoke cleared several seconds later, his expression changed drastically. He was in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Jiang was still alive, protected by a shield created by the girl using her hidden profession ability, Earth Eternal Shield. With her hands extended towards the shield, it began to crack. Closing her eyes and with blood trickling from her mouth, she told Jiang that she was in great pain. Jiang, standing behind her, looked at her with a surprised and dumbfounded expression, realizing that she was actually a defensive type. The man with blue hair had overlooked her, but seeing her block his attack with the shield, he became enraged. He glared at her aggressively, clenched his teeth, and readied himself to attack again. Jiang saw this as a perfect opportunity to strike. He extended his hand to one side, releasing the poisonous mist. Moments later, he landed on the ground. Suddenly, several insects rapidly approached him from behind. One of his subordinates, lying on the ground, reached out and called out to him, urging him to be careful. Holding his sword in one hand, he turned his head and saw the insects rapidly approaching, prompting him to become alert. In a swift move, he grabbed one of his subordinates by the hood. The subordinate, confused and unaware of what was happening, found himself being used as a shield. With one hand gripping his sword and the other holding his subordinate by the hood, he positioned the subordinate in front of him. As the insects lacked intelligence, they targeted his subordinate instead of him. The force of the insect's attack sent their bodies flying backward, leaving his subordinate seriously injured. With his subordinate lying beside him, he knelt down, leaned his sword against the ground, rested his arm on his knee, and looked down at the ground, coughing. Jiang descended from the second floor, advancing toward him with disdain, thinking he was despicable for using his own man as a shield. The insect's attack pierced the man's chest as he lay on the ground. Despite being badly injured and bleeding from his mouth, he miraculously remained alive. Coughing, he drew his master's attention. Standing up, he approached Jiang and, glancing at his subordinate, expressed gratitude for enduring the attack on his behalf. Jiang, standing before him, stayed silent. The man retrieved a dragon pill from his pocket, placed it in his mouth, and consumed it, unwillingly resorting to its power. He approached Jiang, dragging his sword along the ground, causing small rocks to lift and hover slowly. Observing the situation, Jiang shifted into an offensive stance. Meanwhile, the girl beside him, clutching her wounded arm, stayed motionless. Gripping his sword tightly and aiming it at Jiang, the man's eyes gleamed with malice as he threatened to decapitate Jiang with his next strike. Jiang, however, remained composed, meeting the man's gaze with calm resolve, prepared to confront any attack. As the Dragon Yuan pill's power surged through him, an immense elemental energy dragon materialized behind him, its colossal form shimmering with an intense glow. The dragon's eyes sparkled with readiness, signaling that it was primed for battle. He planted his feet firmly, the ground beneath him fracturing into shards with the force of his stance. With a fierce grip, he brandished his sword and locked eyes with Jiang, his gaze burning with a relentless resolve to end the fight once and for all. His energy radiated with such intensity that the rocks around him began to levitate. Jiang's gaze fixated on the formidable dragon, a wave of terror washing over him as he doubted his ability to endure the impending assault. The blue-haired warrior slowly unsheathed his sword, the blade glinting ominously. With a steely determination, He resolved to execute the second technique of the Dragon Slash, preparing for a decisive strike. In that instant, he unleashed the formidable descending Dragon's Cut, directing a devastating strike towards Jang. As he did, an overwhelming surge of energy emanated from his body, and in a flash, the elemental energy dragon surged forward with incredible speed, its jaws parted wide, poised to deliver the final blow. At that critical moment, the girl stepped in front of Jang, her resolve unwavering. With her hands outstretched towards the oncoming assault, she summoned the Earth Eternal Shield once more. Jiang shielded his face with his elbow and glanced her way. Seeing her, battered yet steadfast, ready to intercept yet another attack, he couldn't hide his surprise at her tenacity. In a flash, a shimmering green shield enveloped them. The spiritual dragon, undeterred, launched a fierce assault on the barrier, causing the ground to fracture and a thick veil of smoke to rise. With her hands outstretched, she focused all her energy on maintaining the shield against the relentless attack. Eyes closed and teeth clenched, she explained to Jiang, her voice strained yet clear, that the man's power had surged dramatically. He had consumed the Xiao family's secret dragon Yun pill, amplifying the dragon's strength many times over. Her shield, unable to fully repel the assault, began to fracture, signaling their impending doom. As the cracks widened, she mustered every ounce of her remaining strength to sustain it for as long as possible. Meanwhile, Jiang clutched his cloak, his gaze fixated on the spiritual dragon. He couldn't help but marvel at its power, realizing the true extent of the blue-haired warrior's strength. Each blow from the dragon was lethal, showcasing the terrifying might behind every strike. The earlier assault had already been awe-inspiring, leaving Jiang unprepared for the sheer force of this new attack. The blue-haired warrior leaped forward, closing the distance between them, his gaze locking onto Jiang with a fierce intensity. Noticing the shield beginning to fracture, a smug smile curled on his lips. He unleashed the descending dragon's cut repeatedly, each powerful slash aimed directly at the weakening barrier, determined to shatter it completely. Jiang's eyes met those of the blue-haired warrior, and with steely resolve, he raised his hand toward the sky, activating the swarm of insects mark. Recognizing the merciless strength of his opponent, Jiang resolved to hold nothing back. As the girl's shield finally shattered, a horde of thousands of insects surged from Jiang's hand, swarming into the sky with a buzzing fury. The blue-haired warrior's eyes widened in shock as he gazed upward at the teeming mass of insects filling the sky. Clenching his teeth, confusion and alarm flickered across his face as he struggled to comprehend what was unfolding. Amidst the swarming horde pouring from Jiang's hand, Jiang fixed his stare on the blue-haired man, and with a steady voice, warned him to prepare for what was coming next. Sitting on the ground behind him, the girl pressed a hand to the wound on her shoulder, her eyes widening in surprise as she watched Jiang. She couldn't help but wonder if he truly possessed the extraordinary powers of the creation class. As swarms of insects gathered around Jiang, they directed their collective gaze towards the blue-haired warrior, poised and ready to strike. As Jiang advanced towards him, he issued the command for the insects to attack. At the sound of this command, the blue-haired warrior clenched his teeth in panic, realizing the dire situation he was in. Knowing that facing such a multitude of insects at once left him with little chance of victory, fear gripped him. With Jiang's order echoing in the air, the insect surged forward, closing in on him and preparing to strike. Confronted by the overwhelming swarm of insects, he drew his sword and adopted a defensive posture. With a determined expression, he fixed his gaze on Jiang and executed the descending dragon cut. As his sword pulsed with potent energy, he refused to yield, dismissing the insects as mere nuisances unworthy of his surrender. Effortlessly, he began slicing through the insects, even as Little Nine emitted a poisonous mist from Jiang's body. Fixing him with a piercing gaze, he extended his hand and questioned the truth of his beliefs. To his astonishment, the injured insects started regenerating before his eyes. Surprised by this unexpected turn, he couldn't help but wonder how such regeneration was possible. Moments later, the insects pressed forward, renewing their assault. He fought back with his sword, cleaving through their bodies, only to watch them regenerate with alarming speed. Panic gripped him as he grappled with the realization that these creatures couldn't be killed by conventional means. As the insects continued to swarm from Jiang's body, He regarded the blue-haired warrior with a steely gaze, determined to test his endurance. Behind him, the girl turned her head, her expression a mix of astonishment and admiration, pondering the true extent of his strength. Enraged by Jiang's taunts, he swung his sword with fury, unleashing the descending dragon cut once more, cleaving an insect in half. As the spiritual dragon reappeared, it opened its maw and began devouring the insects. He had chosen this attack strategically, knowing that the dragon's relentless appetite would prevent the insects from regenerating. Caught off guard, he felt a sharp bite on his arm as an insect attacked from behind, injecting venom and forcing him to release his grip on his sword. With a grimace of pain, he turned to see the insect, gritting his teeth as he realized the gravity of the situation. This turn of events was far from ideal. With his right hand incapacitated by poison, wielding the sword was no longer an option. Forced to act quickly, he reached into his garments and retrieved a crimson object. As the insects closed in, he raised the object skyward and invoked the technique known as Jade Protection of Life. In that moment, a potent crimson aura enveloped his form, radiating with formidable energy. Mocking Jiang, he questioned whether Jiang truly believed he could defeat the mighty Xiao family with a mere swarm of insects. Jiang remained silent, observing him intently. The blue-haired man extended his hand towards him, his expression serious as he inquired about the nature of the treasure and its remarkable power. With his command issued, he directed the insects to consume him. However, the object summoned a protective shield around the blue-haired man's body. Despite Jiang's orders, the insects relentlessly attacked the shield to no avail. Witnessing their futile efforts, he swiftly recognized that not even a scratch had been made upon the shield by the assault. As the blue-haired man tended to the wound on his arm from the insect bite, he turned to Jiang and cautioned him against expending his efforts, explaining that the shield was powered by the inherited treasure of the Xiao family known as the Jade treasure, imbued with divine capabilities. However, Jiang remained undeterred, insisting on another assault and commanding the insects to attack once more. The blue-haired man fixed his gaze on Jiang, elucidating that once the Jade treasure was activated, the shield became impervious to all external assaults. With this protective barrier in place, Jiang's attempts to harm him would be futile. Jiang maintained his silence as the insects persisted in attacking the shield. Meanwhile, the blue-haired man advanced toward them. Witnessing Jiang's mastery over the insects and his ability to wield the ancestral treasure, the blue-haired man couldn't help but commend him for his remarkable prowess. Even if Jiang were to exhaust all his strategies, he wouldn't be able to inflict harm. Witnessing the man's advance, the girl rose to her feet and seized Jiang's garments. In moments, blood trickled from the man's mouth as he drew near Jiang. With a smile, he extended a final offer. If Jiang agreed to submit and follow him, he could grant Jiang the coveted status of sharing his surname, a privilege many aspired to attain. With his proposal laid out, he urged Jiang to ponder it meticulously, emphasizing not to overlook such a significant opportunity. Jiang regarded him with a composed expression, taking several moments of silence to contemplate. However, as he fixed his gaze upon the blue-haired man, a wave of anger washed over him. It infuriated Jiang to see the blue-haired man's arrogance had blinded him to the gravity of his circumstances. Upon hearing this, the girl turned her head towards him, a perplexed expression crossing her features as she pondered Jiang's intentions. He approached Jiang, extending his hand with a smirk, and requested him to cease his boasting. Whether Jiang accepted the offer or not held little significance to him, for even if he couldn't eliminate Jiang today, he remained confident that he could do so on any other given day. Under the extensive influence of the Xiao family across the nation, evading or confronting them would prove futile. Jiang fixed the blue-haired man with a steady gaze, a smile playing at his lips. He reminded the blue-haired man of his earlier assertion that one couldn't uncover anything if there were no traces to discover. After stating this, Jiang posed a question. What would be the consequences if he were to perish without leaving behind any evidence? Suddenly, a colossal tentacle slammed into the ground, its impact echoing through the air. At the sound, the blue-haired man's head jerked back slightly, his expression morphing into one of dread as he pondered the source of the disturbance. This massive appendage belonged to the insect mother, who emerged from the swarm and loomed behind them. Witnessing her immense size, the girl collapsed to the ground in shock. The blue-haired man gazed upwards, his expression fraught with fear and beads of sweat forming on his brow as he beheld the immense and menacing figure before him. Meanwhile, Jang issued the command for the insect mother to consume him. Little Nine, upon hearing Jang's directive, began to move towards the blue-haired man, expressing gratitude to Jang as she hungered for the prey. At this revelation, the blue-haired man's countenance shifted dramatically, reflecting his growing apprehension. A fear unlike any he had ever experienced gripped him. Little Nine smiled menacingly as she used her formidable strength to lash out with her tentacle, striking the blue-haired man with tremendous force. His body was hurled through the air, crashing violently into the wall, which shattered upon impact. Screams of agony escaped him as he struggled to comprehend the existence of a monstrous being like Little Nine. The blue-haired man inquired of Jang about the nature of Little Nine, expressing disbelief at her monstrous form. With a composed demeanor, Jang elucidated that Little Nine had recently completed her reproduction cycle, making him and the Jade precisely what she required to satiate her hunger. Meanwhile, Little Nine continued her relentless assault on the blue-haired man, repeatedly striking him with her tentacle, enveloping the area in a dense cloud of smoke. Within moments, the shield began to shatter into fragments, prompting him to cry out in agony, bewildered by the ease with which the barrier had crumbled. Blood seeped from his mouth as he collapsed to the ground, unable to comprehend the unfolding events. The realization dawned upon him that the fate of the Xiao family and the Jade were now hanging by a thread, on the verge of vanishing entirely. With the shield shattered, Little Nine fixed her gaze upon him, her intent clear as she drew her tentacle closer, preparing to administer the fatal strike. Jiang maintained a stoic demeanor, silently observing the unfolding scene. Little Nine launched her attack on the blue-haired man, pulverizing the ground into fragments in the process. After a brief interval, Little Nine completed her transformation, assuming her human guise once more and embracing Jiang. With closed eyes and a serene smile, she remarked that the blue-haired man had been quite satisfying. Expressing her gratitude, she went on to declare that she loved Jiang the most. Meanwhile, the girl sitting on the floor turned her head away, her expression a mix of confusion and fear upon witnessing Little Nine's transformation. As Jiang walked away, he glanced back at her, resolving to ensure her safety. Panic surged through the girl as she sat on the floor, her brow damp with sweat. The realization that she now harbored his secret weighed heavily on her mind, prompting fearful thoughts of whether he might eliminate her to maintain his silence.